Alright, so we saw the problem in the previous video, which was the fact that the particle emitter is moving too fast and the particle emission cannot keep up. So we end up getting these gaps in the emission, which ends up leading to this little phenomenon here, which is this beading effect of these little clumps of particles, which it'll look horrible if you're to, render out an animation with this. It's going to look really, really bad. Okay? So to fix that is actually really easy. This video is going to be pretty short because Softimage makes fixing this problem extremely easy. So let me close this. Don't think I'll need that anymore. The way to fix this is actually pretty easy. Whenever you have a point cloud, you're going to have a property set for it automatically in this version of Softimage. Okay? And it's the simulation settings property down here. Alright, you can access it from here. You can also select the object. You can hit F3 and you can find it in here. Here's the simulation settings. You can also select the object and go to selection over here in the MCP and select it from here. So when you open up the simulation settings PPG, by default all of these point clouds, all of these simulated point clouds with ice have a subframe sampling setting of 1. That's the default. So the key here is to keep the subframe sampling as low as possible to reduce the simulation calculation time. When you increase the subframe sampling, you get better quality and more accurate simulations, but the amount of time it takes to calculate these simulations becomes longer. It becomes slower. Okay, so it's kind of a give and take. So by default, set to 1. Whenever you have this beading effect, you may want to come in here and increase this. Now, don't go crazy and take this and try to increase it all the way like this to 20. It's not going to go very well for you. In most simulations, that's going to take a really long time to simulate. So let me cancel that. Let me go back to the first frame of the animation. I'm going to set this back to 1. I'm going to hit play just so you can see the beading effect. There's that sort of beading effect like these little clumps, which doesn't look very good. So let me go back and I'm going to increase this to 2 and I'm going to hit play. Now you can see that we get ourselves a really nice steady stream of particles that no longer creates that clumping effect on the mesh. And if you still see a clumping effect, it's very easy. Just go back and increase this some more. So we'll go to 3, and as you continue to increase that, you're going to get a much more accurate simulation. But you notice that my frame rate has dropped pretty drastically, okay? Because now we're doing a subframe sampling value of 3. So the more subframe sampling, the better the simulation will look, but the slower it's going to calculate. So you got to kind of decide there if you really want to increase it really far or not. So my advice, increase it very slowly in increments of 1 at a time until you get an effect that looks good, until your problem is solved. And once you get to that point, stop. Don't increase it anymore because really it's just going to be a waste of extra time. I can come in here and modify this mesh a little bit, maybe smooth it out a little bit more. If you want to, you could even use the Lagoa Fluid Shaper, which will help to flatten the mesh a little bit. This looks fine for this. I think this works out pretty good. So there you go. That's subframe sampling. Pretty easy to use. You just got to increment this parameter. Just be careful with it. Don't go too crazy with it because it's going to slow your computer down quite a bit when you're running these Lagoa Sims. Alright? Okay. So last but not least here, what I'm going to do is, if I render this out, what I end up with is this sort of gray material here. So I have this gray material here which doesn't look too good. So I'll select the polygonize mesh and I'm going to open up the material manager here real quick. I have a material that I've already created, so it's convenient for us. This paste material. I'm just going to right click and assign to selection. And that'll give the polygonized mesh this nice sort of bluish material. And if you go ahead and render this out, you can see we got this nice sort of bluish, sort of gooey looking material here. Kind of shiny, a little bit reflective. It's just using an architectural shader from Mental Ray. Okay, so there you go. That's pretty much all there is to subframe sampling. It can come in real handy to solve some serious problems that come down the road that you run into when doing simulations. That's it. We're pretty much done. I recommend going in here and playing with this project some more. Play around with the emit grid settings, maybe increase the resolution so that you get maybe a little bit more detailed particle effect. Mine's isn't very detailed. My particles are pretty big. I normally don't do that, but for the tutorial I did it just because it'd be faster to simulate. For an actual high quality thing, you probably want to maybe take this down to like 0.25 or 0.3, something like that. Also, feel free to play around with the granular material. Play around with these different inelastic settings. See what kind of different effects you can come up with. And you may also want to play around with the polygonized mesh just to come up with different looking meshes. You can also use the fluid shaper. The Lagoa fluid shaper will give you a different looking mesh. Maybe flatten it a bit if that's the kind of look that you want. Alright, so that pretty much is going to do it. I'm going to end this video here.